And tonight we have some analyses to do. Our Channels Television's data analyst and consultant, Babajide Ogunsanwo, will be joining me on the screen. Babajide, please come over. Thank you so much, Jude. It's good to see you.
Sean, the pleasure is all mine. Pleasure is
good to see
mine.
you. All right, let's get to it. A lot of issues around BVAS, and when that election in Osun State came and there was a tribunal judgment a few days ago, it does look to me that it threw up a lot of conversation around the almighty BVAS that we thought that will save the day. But do you think what you're telling us tonight, or you will be telling us tonight, is that BVAS still has the magic wand to save the day, isn't it?
BVAS still has the magic wand, Sean. But before we go into that, I'd like to start from this. Sean, you know my brother Femi?
Yeah.
When I was 10 years old, it was half my age. Now that I'm 40 years old, the tribunal still expects him to be half my age. The challenge we've seen with the BVAS is that our courts, especially the tribunal, is good with law, A1. But when it comes to data analysis, being able to understand that my brother was half my age when I was 10 years old does not necessarily mean it will always stay half my age. And we'll go into exactly what happened. We'll look at the facts and we'll look at what role will BVAS play in this election. Let's start with exactly how many BVAS will we have. It depends on how many polling
Absolutely.
units.
Let me take this out of the way.
It depends.
So our viewers can get a good view of it.
So the number of BVAS in each state will depend on how many polling units we have across the country. And I'd like to take a look at exactly what will go on with the polling units. There are three ways to look at this. The first is to look at how many polling units are in Nigeria. The second way to look at it is from the regional perspective. And the third and final way to look at it is from the state-by-state perspective. On the regional perspective, we have 176,846 polling units spread across the country. In simple terms, an average polling unit will have 530 voters. That's the national perspective. Here's the regional perspective. Most of the polling units are in three zones. The Northwest, over 41,000 polling units, the Southwest, over 34,000 polling units, and the North Central, over more than 27,000 polling units. In these three zones, Sheung, have 6 out of every 10 polling units are in these zones. So these are the zones that we'll be keeping an eye on. What exactly will the BVAS results show? But we can also look at this apart from the regional perspective. We can look at it from the state-by-state perspective. And if we choose to do that, Sean, there are only 12 states that each have more than 5,000 polling units. I'll repeat that again. Out of all 36 states, only 12 states, these are the top big states, only 12 states have more than 5,000 polling units.
And these are the states that have more voting population.
These are the states that have more voting population. These are the states that the likes of Mr. Baba Chelawal and Peter Obi wants to win. These are the states that Asiwaju Bola Tinubu wants to win. And these are the states that Atiku has experience with. He also wants to win these states. In the Northwest, 3 key states that have more than 5,000 polling units: Kano, Kaduna, Katsina. In Benue, North Central has more than 5,000 polling units. In the Northeast, Borno and Bauchi have more than 5,000 polling units. In the Southeast, Anambra is a state. It has more than 5,000 polling units. Let's go to the Southwest: Lagos, Oyo, Ogun. These 3 states in the Southwest each have more than 5,000 polling units. In the South-South, it's Rivers and Delta. So as the elections, the next 21 days, we'll keep an eye as to how many of these states have also collected. We've seen high numbers of PVC collection.
And I guess that ends on Sunday. And so a lot of things will happen also, because not only when you have the voting numbers, but you need to have, what matters is how many people have collected their PVC. That is the real voting number.
That's the real voting number, because it's the PVC and the BVAS and either your fingerprint or facial recognition is what will be used to determine if you will be qualified to vote, if you will be accredited
Absolutely.
to vote on that day. But let's look at one of the issues we've had with how some of our lawyers interpret the law, especially we've seen that there's a challenge with understanding data. So regarding Osun State, I'd like us to look at it in this way. And first is what happened, why did it happen, and where did it happen? Again, I'll repeat that. What happened, why did it happen, and where it happened. Once we're done with that, we'll then look at the implication of these events, and finally we'll look at what exactly does data analysis show about what happened in Osun State? What happened?
Okay.
16th of July.
That is the day of the election.
The day of the election. INEC pronounced the winner afterwards, and it said Ademola Adeleke won by a margin of more than 28,000 votes. He had scored 403,371 votes compared to Boyega Oyetola's 375,000.
Was the incumbent seeking a return to office.
Exactly, and this were the actual results. A margin of 28,344 gave Ademola Adeleke the victory. Fast forward 6 months after, what happened? The tribunal removed 120,000 votes from Ademola Adeleke, removed 60,000 votes from Boyega Oyetola.
In over 700 polling units.
In 744 polling units, which we'll get into. And by doing that, it means that Oyetola had a margin of 24,265. Now, that is what happened. Let's look at why did it happen? Now, why did it happen? And it's because, based on the petitioners from the side of Oyetola, they alleged that there were 744 polling units where overvoting occurred. But let's take a look at the facts. INEC had produced a report that showed that the total number of voters accredited, 170,614. But here's the curious thing. That number came from the back end, not from the BVAS machine. Sheon, you might want to ask.
That's a major contention between the two sides.
And
there are different reports coming from INEC.
Different reports, but I'll explain the difference. You remember when we were coppers, when we were doing our NYC, you go to the bank, you deposit your alawi, 5,000 naira then, and you get a copy of the teller. You take the teller back home, and 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, what the teller shows you is different from what you have in your bank account, even though you have proof that you've deposited your allowance. What has happened is the bank has not yet posted your money. And so what you have on your teller is different from what your bank account is showing, is different from what your bank has. And so this information from the server, it is important to know that for the server, for the BVAS to upload information to the back end, there has to be network. For the BVAS to upload finally all the information on the BVAS to the back end, the presiding officer has to click that button to confirm that all the data that was accredited on the BVAS goes to the back end. So the first report from the server was not actually the report of all the BVAS machines. It was just the report of the numbers that were on the server as at when the report had been generated. But the real number is the physical BVAS. That is where the magic is, because that number stays the same. This number's from
So you're saying that from records and the data available, at different times, INEC back end had different figures. There is a difference of about 8,000.
That is correct.
In the records.
That is correct.
But the actual thing on the physical BVAS is 180,000.
That is correct. And that is because, Sean, when we go to the polling unit on accreditation day, on voting day, and you get accredited, your accreditation data will not go to the back end if there's no network. Accreditation data only goes to the back end when there is network. And to confirm that all data on the accreditation machine goes to the back end, it is required for the presiding officer to complete and press that button to make sure that everything is uploaded. What we saw in Osun was that there were so many presiding officers that did not upload the data.
Not that the BVAS was not working.
The BVAS was working. They did not upload the data, so the data on the BVAS could show 1,000 people accredited, but because they have not uploaded the data, they shut it down and show the server at the back end will show a different result. Results from the server is different from the results from the BVAS machine. And globally, so if you check, in all the countries that use the BVAS or similar technology to the BVAS, the physical check of the BVAS globally is the standard. This is where the information really lies.
And this is where the problem lies, the discrepancy, or the controversies around the figures that were presented by the different parties based on the information available to them from INEC.
So because of the discrepancy, the tribunal believed that there was overvoting. But Sean, let me give you some simple maths. That 2 plus 2 and 2 times 2 gives you the same result does not mean 3 plus 3 and 3 times 3 will give you the same results. Again, that my brother was half my age when I was 10 years old does not mean when I'm 40, it will still remain half my age. The tribunal has shown a good understanding of the law, but we haven't seen sufficient understanding of the role of technology and data from the tribunal. And so this is exactly what happened. Now we go into where it happened. It happened based from the petitioner across 744 polling units. In other words, the petitioner showed and was able to discuss that the number of accredited voters from the back end was lower than the number of accredited voters that was used for the election. And so, for instance, we have 10 local governments that these 744 polling units came up with. So we look at Ede North. There are 139 polling units in Ede North. Based on what happened, they cancelled 99. In Ede South, out of 101 polling units, 90% of polling units in Ede South were cancelled. The challenge is all these 10 local governments was won by one candidate. Ede North, Ede South, Egbedore, Ejigbo, Ila, Ilesha West, Irepodu, Obokun, Olorunda, Oshogbo. Each of these local governments was won by Ademola Adeleke, but the tribunal cancelled everything across these local governments. So that's where it happened. What are the implications? The implications are that across all the polling units that were cancelled, Ademola Adeleke lost 28% of his total votes.
Of over 360,000 or so votes.
Exactly. He lost 28% of his total votes. Boyega Oyetola lost 16% of his total votes. And that's exactly how we are today, where the tribunal declared. But in the final analysis...
Just for a moment, hold the thought. What does the data analysis reveal about Osun? If we wrap this up, you've mentioned 5 points here.
Yeah, so quickly, the 5 points from data analysis, and these are the facts, that the proof of overvoting needs to be reviewed. What we've seen the tribunal do does not necessarily make justice to the number of people that voted on the election. How do we prove overvoting occurred in an election? That needs to be reviewed. The second thing that we see from the Osun elections is that human error still affects manual entry of results at the polling units. The third, and perhaps one of the most important, is Nigeria's telecommunications infrastructure affects the transfer time and speed. In other words, what happens at the polling units and how it communicates to the server still relies on network. Information on the BVAS machine should be the primary, and it is globally the most reliable source of election data. And finally, Sheun, data discrepancy is not sufficient proof of overvoting. And we need to be able to look at these 5 points in how we look at the elections, especially in knowing that these sort of issues are going to happen after the February 25th election. We need to keep an eye on these things. The proof of overvoting needs to be reviewed, and data discrepancy from the server and the front-end BVAS machine is not sufficient proof of overvoting. Let's rely on the most reliable source.
It's good to see you again. Good job that you've done that. Thank you so much for...